Welcome back to the Two Touch podcast, where myself, Matty Downing, and fellow head coach Alex Woollerton bring on some of the people that we've had the pleasure of meeting in our footballing journeys. It might be parents, it might be coaches, or players that we've had the chance to play with as well.
On today's episode, we are joined by the legend Simon Clifford. Simon has got over 30 years of coaching experience in the industry. He's coached the likes of Jay Okacha, Gareth Bale, and most recently Archie Gray, just to name a few. He was the founder of the Brazilian soccer school, the owner of Garforth Town, and we're going to dig deep today into what it takes to play at the top level.
Juninho said to me, when you go to Brazil, you'll find that even the smallest street corner club is more professional in its approach to coaching and structured than the biggest clubs in England. The way through, I've noticed that with some of the kids that are successful, it's that relationship with them. Know that the dad's got the back and he's there for everything. He's taking everything, he's sorting them out with the coach to do this, the person to do that, but he's not kind of...
It's a partnership. Yes, that isn't it? Yeah, you've got to work together as a team. So Simon, how are we?
Great, good to be with you both.
No, thank you very much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. So I'll kick us off. When did your passion for football start at?
As early as I can remember, I grew up with a family in Middlesbrough, and we were all Middlesbrough Football Club mad. And so a lot of our happiest family memories actually revolve around the club and going. So as a kid, that's all I wanted to do. So I was reasonable at it, probably through practice, because I always had a ball at my feet. So in school, I played a couple of years up, but it was a very different landscape then coaching-wise. And I suppose tactically, I liked to dribble. My favourite player was a Middlesbrough lad, the winger, and I played on the wing. I was number 7, called Terry Cochrane. Had his socks down, shirt out. He was from Northern Ireland. Probably he was emulating George Best. So I copied him. I used to draw actually at Ayresome Park at the match. I would take a notebook and try and draw what Terry Cochrane had done, because in those days we didn't even have video, and he was doing step overs. I didn't know what they were at the time, so that was. But I tried to play dribbling, taking people on, shooting. That was my game, but it doesn't make it particularly popular with coaches or teachers, even if you are a good player. So by secondary school, I had a lot of fallouts with my coaches in that I wanted to play one way and they wanted me to play another. The Brazil 82 team had come in, which I loved. I loved all of them: Zico, Socrates, Eder, Falcao, Junior. But English football was completely different. And I got dropped for the first time in my life. I think I was a 13. And I asked the teacher why, and it was because I wasn't playing as he wanted me to play. I got dropped to another game. I came back and I thought, I'll do anything he says. We were playing Huncliffe from Saltburn in the game back. And I got a few goals in the first half. And I thought, he won't be very happy at that. I could have got a 4th. I squared it for a lad. And we came in 4-1. And he said to me, Clifford, off. So I had a few tears in my eyes. And that day I thought, well, I'm just giving this game up, which I did. I didn't play again until... whilst coaching, I was asked to join Tadcaster Albion in, I think, 93, and I played for their reserve team. But I left football and went to athletics, which later became the best thing for my football, because it got me with an interest, and it got me to studying sports science at a very early age, before it was kind of a thing in schools or in... So I took up running. I thought, well, if I do running, it's against the clock. It's not where a teacher can say, well, you've got to pass here, or you've got to do there. And to be honest, there was no passing. It was a long ball game. So I thought, I'm going to do that. I wasn't very good at it at first, but within not too long, reading books, trying to study, asking people, I became a fanatic in that as well. And my bedroom at the time would be full of magazines, journals, writing, everything about how to make myself quicker. And that went on for my mid-teenage years. By the time I came to study in Leeds, I was running 80, 90 mile a week. I'd won a few things, but I contemplated where I was going with athletics. I probably wanted to be the best in the world. I wasn't going to be able to do that. I didn't have enough base natural ability in the beginning. Like I said, I wasn't even in the team. I thought at best I might be a Commonwealth Games athlete. And as I was training 3 times a day, I thought, all of that effort, is that worth it for? I met Gillian, who became my wife, and I thought, okay, stop the running. And I threw myself into my degree, which was sport, an early sort of sports science degree. finished that, was going to do a PhD straight away. Julian was going into teaching, so instead went into teaching, and my degree got me re-engaged with football. But I say I'd had that 5 years out in athletics, went from a sports science point of view, and although athletics at the time was the Amateur Athletics Association, amateur, the way they did things then in the athletic or the Olympic sports was far more professional maybe than you get football. It was almost topsy-turvy. So, yeah, it's always been my first love, but I left it for a few years, as I said, in my teenage years.
So from obviously coming to uni, the running kind of taking, being a front runner as it is, how did you actually then go into the football coaching world as it was?
Yeah, I suppose whatever I do, it's just my personality. I try to find out everything about it. And so coming back into football through my degree, we looked at, I did physiology and biomechanics with Will Pace, who at the time was with Howard at Leeds. He was one of the first fitness guys in. So I'd re-engaged with football, then took the teaching job, and not far from here at Corpus Christi. And the headmaster asked me to set up an 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, which I did. There was only me doing it, so some of the sessions you'd have 90 kids. My first session that I took, I put on a video, a BBC video called The Boys from Brazil, and I played this to the 90 kids, crammed into a classroom. It's like an 1.5-hour documentary on Brazil up to that point, which was probably up to the 86 World Cup it showed. And I said, this is football, this is how we're going to play. We start Thursday. So then there was me, 90 kids for quite a long time, and obviously with ratios today you couldn't do it. As I say, they'd be interested. But to be honest, we got some good stuff done. We got some balls. I got different people I knew to help with equipment. And I opened the school at half term and holidays. I'd let them in then. We'd train before school. And so again, some of my athletics training many times a day I started. And I was writing to people. I got a load of stuff from Ajax. I got a load of stuff from Italy. I wrote to our FA and I said, Brazil is again, go back to my journey as a thing. I wasn't allowed to dribble as a kid. Okay. The shouts in England were always, easy ball, into the mixer and long and all that sort of stuff. When I went to Brazil, eventually, all you hear was, boa dribles, boa bola, which means good ball, good dribble. It was the antithesis of here. But yeah, thinking of my love of that style of play, I wrote to our FA and I said, is there any materials we can get on Brazil? And they wrote me a couple of lines back, which I knew was wrong, and saying they're naturals. And then, by a massive coincidence, Middlesbrough signed Juninho, at the time Brazilian and South American Player of the Year, yeah, and a great person. And so I got onto him. I found a way to get in with him. Him and I became really good friends. So my life ended up for a few years coaching at Corpus, sometimes giving a couple of kids and their parents a lift to either Cesspod at Leeds, where they might train, or some of them got involved with Middlesbrough Football Club. This is before academies, when it was centres of excellence. And then I'd go to Juninho's house each night. So we'd sit and we'd talk football for a night. And I realised he was telling me about a completely different world in terms of coaching to what we'd have here. A lot more similar to what we have today.
I think it's crazy that, how obviously you've managed to, try and obviously find that link with Juninho, such a big player at the time. And obviously, like you say, that thing where you kind of, once you're doing something, you really want to know everything about it. But to have him there and have that connection.
It was an unbelievable stroke of fortune for him. Yeah. His dad didn't like him knocking about with footballers. I was a teacher at the time, so he pushed him towards me. So sometimes his dad would ring on a night, and phone call at night to where we were living in Leeds at the time. And his daddy said, Juninho wants to speak to you. I said, okay. Juninho would come on. Oh, he didn't want to speak to me at all. His dad was pushing it. Yeah. And his dad would get me there. But then him and I, it took off. I'm with his dad. And eventually I'd spent maybe a year every night at their house, more or less every night. Well, a few times a week, whatever it was. And I said to them, I want to go to Brazil and see for myself. I'd like to meet Pele. I'd like to meet Zico, Rivellino, Careca. And Juninho's dad said to me, Simon, these guys are very busy. My son's the Brazil number 10. And he hasn't even met these guys. But I persisted. I got in touch with the embassy in London, which wasn't that helpful. But it was eventually Juninho that some of their contacts got me. So I made a trip out to Brazil. I went there for the whole summer holiday 1 year, borrowed $5,000 from the Teachers Union. Juninho had told me about futsal, football de salon. I asked everybody in Brazil, I said, tell me the great and the good. I met Ronaldo's first coach, Brazilian Ronaldo. I lived in São Paulo Football Club, one of their facilities at the University of São Paulo. I lived in the stadium for about 3-4 weeks. Cockroaches everywhere, but I was in heaven. I had a video camera, I had paper, and I had a dictaphone, and I recorded everything I saw. And I went all over in Rio, São Paulo, and when I came back, the BBC had done some features on me. They came out and actually made a documentary, but they'd showed some of that before I got back. And believe it or not, Glenn Hoddle had got in touch with me. He was England manager at the time. I was still a teacher, and he said, through John Gorman, his assistant, they said, we'd like you to work with Graham Lasso towards the 98 World Cup, teaching him a trick or two, because the football was that different then, I can't tell you, it was untrue. And nobody really had a clue about anything. When I went to Brazil, nobody else had really been out there. We hadn't heard of futsal here, it didn't exist. And so the next years were spent trying to get all that to take off. So we started the first school in Leeds, and then somebody to do with Michael Owen got in touch. I ended up doing a book with him, working with him. And then Lego came and sponsored us, and the schools went across Britain, and then that all took off quick.
What year was that you actually created Brazilian soccer schools, and how did you really go about that as such? Was it?
Yeah, Juninho, I linked up in 96. By 97, probably the end of 96, I was coaching kids along the lines of what he told me. Right, so it was actually called something different. It was called Jogar Brasileiro, which meant sort of play Brazilian. But then I wasn't happy to just go on what he and his dad were telling me. I thought I need to go out there. So the Brazilian soccer school probably started end of 96, 97. I'm in Brazil all summer of 97, the whole summer holidays. I come back. I've got Arsene Wenger sent somebody at his club to speak to me. Everton asked me to work with their young players, Dave Parnamy, Middlesbrough, Newcastle. I was a teacher, and I was thinking, and to be honest, all I'd done is go to Brazil. Yeah. Nobody else had.
It's all just come back.
I hadn't done anything else.
Yeah.
And TV showing a few clips, but then the kids were doing good. I got the first futsal balls I brought over from Brazil. Nike had been talking to me. Juninho got me in with Nike. But then Maita came in through Glenn Hoddle, England manager. He said, speak to them. Maita produced the futsal ball within, I think, 2 weeks. So I had some balls, and our kids were going up. We were training 3 times a week, massive amount of touches. Again, it was very different too. And we'd play pro clubs. Because a professional club would say to me, will you come in and work for our coaches? In 97, we had the start of academies after something called the Chart of Equality. And so, as part of that, clubs were compelled, which was good, to do some in-service, to bring out an outsider to work with their coaches. So I ended up going over this next period to every Premier League club, other than Liverpool wouldn't have me. It was Steve Highway and then Liam Brady at Arsenal, who both had a youth there. But I think in both cases, perhaps, both great players, but 2 skillful players, maybe they thought, well, we're not having this guy teach us about skill. We were good players ourselves. I'm not sure.
I was going to say that, were people quite sceptical because you said if it was quite like a lot of it like passing or longer ball at that and you come with this method.
A lot of opposition, a lot of people trying to shut it down, a lot of opposition with the FA, and which got even worse when I worked with Michael Owen, because he was their main man at the time. And that went on for a few years, and the FA then changed the chief executive, and other things changed in the technical department. And then the FA, I think maybe 2002-03, they got me to Keele University with all of the centres of excellence and had me doing sessions with them all. And they sort of, eventually they agreed with futsal and asked me to be on a group of 3 to help run it in this country under them. But I didn't want to do that because I was still a little bit annoyed with all that had happened FA-wise in the beginning, and I was on with all we were doing Brazilian soccer schools. Yeah.
When you were still obviously, setting up the Brazilian soccer school stuff, were you still teaching at that time, or we did it all just kind of take over, just all?
Yeah, it took over. After that, Glenn Hoddle and different things like that, I think in my first year after coming back from Brazil, 442 put me in the 100 most important people in football. And
not bad, is it?
I can't say that away from you now, can they?
Well, I remember a day in school, again, I was at Corpus, and the headmaster said, there's a journalist come downstairs from the Mail and the Times want to speak to you. What should I tell him? And it was crossing over where, and I think he wanted me, I understood, to sort of calm it all down and decide where my priorities were. So Juninho said to me, when you go to Brazil, you'll find that even the smallest street corner club is more professional in its approach to coaching and structured than the biggest clubs in England. Because Juninho, he'd been paid 4 times the salary he had in São Paulo when he was Brazilian Player of the Year, South American. He was Brazil's number 10. He was the player Mario Zagallo was basing the team round for the 98 World Cup. He actually ended up getting a savage injury 9 months before that World Cup. But he would have been the heart of that team, not R9, it was Juninho. But I had him in Middlesbrough, and I had him as a friend. But I had him listening to every night, and he said to me, the football here is like everywhere. It's because he started talking to a few other players. The way we trained, the lack of training, the unprofessionalism, the lack of work with the ball, the lack of the physical conditioning. And I kind of thought, he said to me, you'll find even the smallest clubs better than, and I thought, well, that's a ridiculous statement. You know, that can't be right. When I went to Brazil, what he said was true. And so I kind of, in leaving teaching, I thought, if nobody else does anything about this, if I don't do anything about this nationally, no one will. And I might be getting some opposition. But yeah, I then decided I didn't have any, I had the Mitre deal actually, I think, but that wasn't a lot of money. They were just going to do the ball. But yeah, it was a big risk leaving teaching. But I thought, well, if I don't do this English football-wise, I can't see who will. Yeah.
No, definitely. So obviously you've got the Brazilian soccer schools, you've got kind of, yes, you've got your opposition, but you've got quite a lot of kids on board. Where did things kind of go from there in terms of, just kind of branching it out across the UK and stuff like that?
Well,
and obviously where did you go to, what was your next role?
Yeah, I was on TV a bit, and like I say, with those journalists, everybody was asking me for comment on, we didn't have to, Howard Wilkinson left as technical director, we didn't have one for a bit in England for about 4 or 5 years. And not that I was it, but I was producing a lot of material. I had my own magazine, I was producing books. I did one of my own, it was a bestseller. I did one with Michael Owen. I did a thing with Jay Okacha, you remember?
One of my favourite, that.
Yeah.
Favourite.
I did another one in Brazil. So there's a lot of stuff coming out from me. BBC website did this thing. We were kind of everywhere, but people would look to me, to the press particularly, would ask me kind of, not that where we should be going, but I was creating a lot of noise, and that started to take me away from the coaching itself, because the organisation began to grow, because we were getting a lot of, Brazil also won the 2002 World Cup, which I suppose helped, but that was Brazilian soccer schools. But I had an interest in starting technique earlier. At BSS, Brazilian Soccer Schools, we were the first in the country to start kids as young as 5 with football. That didn't exist then. 5 and 6, it didn't exist. Clubs would take people under 9s, and there wasn't really too much below that. So we began that, and then I'd looked at Boris Becker in tennis, Tiger Woods, rightly or wrongly, the Williams sisters, and I wanted to see how to get technique in earlier. So I wrote the syllabus for Brazilian soccer schools. That was a very big piece of work that all of our kind of schools followed. I mean, I'd got the hint from Brazil, but I used some of my academic background and my work in athletics to sort of come up with this syllabus. Then I wrote one for younger kids for Soccer Tots, this thing Soccer Tots, which was the first preschool program in the world in sport. Everybody laughed at that one. Now you've got rugby tots, tennis tots.
Yeah, there's loads, isn't there? It's just
didn't exist.
There's not even a limit, is there, to how young, really?
So yeah, but then people thought that was the craziest thing going. Yeah. So Archie joined that at 1, Gray. Harry did at the same sort of age, and that was brave of Andy actually to sort of step out a bit and think, well, okay, there might be. I mean, I knew Andy, but there might be something in this that this would help.
Yeah.
But I'd looked at, say, the Williams sisters, etc. Coincidentally, I was once out in Florida making a CD-ROM, which was a thing before DVDs, and I bumped into the Williams dad's sister in Florida, Mel. Sorry, the Williams sister's dad in Florida, Mel. And I'd wrote this Soccer Tots syllabus over the last year, and I was about to go up to him and say, did your kids actually begin at 1 or 2, and did they do this? And I thought, I better not say, because I've done all that work. I'll do it anyway in case he tells me the wrong thing. So I got on with that, I bought Garforth because we had a football development officer in Leeds who was a friend of mine. And he said, the thing is, you're producing these players, but there's going to be nowhere for them to play style-wise. Because a lot of even the ones that we've had, the last years that have come through Brazilian soccer schools, Archie's one. But in those days, those players would not have, that style wasn't as valued as much. I mean, you look at the way Arch plays or can play at centre-half now in the modern football, can more or less play anywhere. But it were different. So John said to me, you're going to need an outlet for them. So I looked at buying Guiseley, I looked at buying Farsley, which were both for sale, and Garforth was. I chose Garforth because it seemed a bigger challenge to take a club that was 9 leagues below the top. And also the stadium was kind of Brazil colours and it was a brand new stadium. And our office, the image as well, it was a pretty new stadium. So we ended up doing that, which I didn't know that the next year, Sir Clive Woodward would approach me. He'd spoke to the FA. Now the FA was run by a guy called Mark Palios. He'd offered Clive the performance director's job for the FA, although he'd come from rugby. And Clive instead wanted to maybe work for the FA eventually, but go into a club. And Rupert Lowe, Southampton chairman, offered him a job of performance director in the club. Clive wanted to write a man who looked around the world and ended up picking me. So the plan at Southampton was eventually for Clive and I to run the first team, believe it or not, despite by that point my only experience had been Garforth, where I just got a promotion. I bought it and ended up not falling into managing it. So went to Southampton and came back and managed Garforth anyway. But so I went in at Southampton as head of sports science, but that was a kind of
term, just
to get us in. We were going to have the reserves for a year and to try and prove ourselves with that.
Yeah.
And Clive was performance director. But had I known that would happen, I wouldn't have bought Garforth.
Just time-wise, just being too stretched across the two, or?
Well, I'd have threw him a lot more into Southampton. I left Southampton. It was difficult with Harry Redknapp, and we had Dave Bassett in as assistant manager, and Dennis Wise was in as a player. It was a real culture clash.
Just with the two.
Clive and I had come in. And it was difficult, and Clive's view was to sort of sit back and take our time a couple of years, but I was that hell-bent at that age on just getting on with things. I didn't really want to, and we got the reserve team. I was the coach of the reserve team. However, I wasn't allowed in Harry kept one of his men, Stuart, to sort of
oversee.
Clive and I weren't allowed in on matches at half time. It was all these sort of things. It was great working with the lads. I mean, me and Theo Walcott, great with him. Nathan Dyer, Bale, Alana, Dexter Blackstock, David McGoldrick, Martin Kearney, Matty Mills. The young lads were great. So very much like Bielsa did later. Before I went in with Clive to Southampton, we spent 9 months drawing up what an ideal club would look like. And when Marcelo was there, it was along the lines of how Clive and I were going to go about it. So even though I didn't stay long, Clive and I redesigned the training ground. Yeah. Clive was behind that. We were putting in a futsal court that when I left didn't end up happening. But I had the scholars, the ones I'd mentioned, they'd come in each day. I had Leon Best as well. And Leon, I really got on well with Leon. So Leon he'd get the other ones in line. First couple of weeks, Nathan Dyer and Theo Walcott were a bit like, what's this guy? He's wanting us to train on the night, train in the morning. I'd say to Leo, yeah, sort them out. So next thing is, he'd get them all down into Southampton, the Nike shop. They all bought shoes that were suitable for futsal. They weren't futsal shoes, but they were. We'd train on the morning. They'd be in at 6:30. I'd drive Bestie in. I'd pick him up, tell him what we were going to do. Meet Clive, lads would have a bit of breakfast. They'd all come on a minibus. So they were training like 7 a.m. till 8 or so. They'd train in their session with Harry if they were in first team, because some of them were getting put up. Theo broke through that season. Bale did later on. And then we'd have them on a night playing futsal as well, for an hour and a half in a school gym, even when they were in the first team. So they were doing 3 time.
So we often get asked with parents why it's important for them to play futsal, because it is slightly different to football, and a lot of the time they want to know how it's going to help them improve them playing football. But what do you suggest like the key things are that they can gain from futsal?
I think the futsal I brought in here in the beginning was even more extreme. It was the original one they had in South America. Instead of a size 4, it was a size 2.
Little size 2.
Yeah. The futsal bounces to 20%, a normal football to 40, up to 40. This one bounced to 10. And certainly that ball, like an ice hockey puck, it was compelled to be on the floor. You couldn't get out of trouble in any other way than finding your way out of trouble, escaping, evading, being quick, thinking, dribble, turn. So it was like a hothouse, a condensed version of, maybe Juninho said to me in the beginning, it's like the whole game playing football in the box. Not an English box where you'd been heading it, but he was meaning in Brazil where it's like... Yeah. So the amount of decision-making that you get there and the amount of awareness that you need, I just think it's like a small laboratory of all the things that we pull out into the game. You know what I mean? Like a microscopic version of an intense game at its best. It's not necessarily futsal that you need to do. I think cage games can be good. There's a lot of them in South London at the minute and players coming out of that. But I think that ball was good because it kept it on the floor. You couldn't get out of it any other way. Juninho said to me, Zico, to name drop, you've got to think quick, play quick. After that, the bigger game's easier. But I think it took a lot of other options away from you. And the small space as well. I used to do it at Corpus Christi in the tiniest of halls, like we do in Harrogate, still now. So, but there's other ways you can do. You can get the same returns. But I certainly, it was night and day difference to any way people were training.
I think obviously just from the times that we dipped into it, like obviously you'll know Tim Bridget, like futsal,
yeah, doing great work.
I just love kind of the pace of it, the speed of we've let a goal in. It's not
like
we walk back like this.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to be up, we're ready because we're playing. Yeah. And there's reaction.
Well, that's it. It's such an intense game. But again, I think that feeds into the decision-making bit. I got some academic work commissioned in the early years of doing it and compared it to normal football and even to the futsal that they do now. And if it was me, Mighty used to do this ball. I'd still probably go with the smaller, heavier one on a hard service. But there's other ways to get the same returns. Yeah.
Obviously, we touched a lot on the background kind of as you're coming up to where you are now. And obviously, you've got your coaching school, Integer, at the moment. What, are you looking to do with young players there? What age do they start with you, the kids at Integer now, roughly?
We did start at 7, 8, and we just took it down to 6.
Right.
So, if that's... Yeah, so it's 6. I think, well, obviously, Harry and Archie have been with me in that for a while. So, I think Arch maybe began at 7, maybe 8. Harry, I think, was 7, but we took it slightly lower to 6. So what we do is it's just to support players individually, and it's a response to all my years in football. The first 10 years, I was obsessed with the technical side for the reasons that I've given you today. I think after Southampton and stuff, in the middle of that, I saw at Southampton, like I'd worked with Michael Owen, but even with Theo, who I was with, Theo had only started playing football at 11. But Southampton surprised me as to how far you could get on pace and acceleration when your technique was far more limited than I would have thought. When I'd been with Michael Owen, Michael said to me, these lads you've got in Leeds, technically they're better than anyone in the England team. What do we mean by technical? I'd say passing and receiving. You know what I mean? Can hit this, can hit that, can, small area around, directional control into... He said only Merce, maybe Paul Merson, he said, would be... I thought, well, but Michael was not good at that stuff at all. But Michael's touch would look better because he'll still get there before you.
Yeah, that just sharp.
But I think when I saw Theo, I was like, flipping heck. He's, I was surprised that, Theo broke through at Southampton that year, obviously to Arsenal. And to be honest, they didn't develop Theo at Arsenal anyway. When I resigned from Southampton, his dad said, well, we've lost Steve Wigley. Now we've lost you. We'll leave now. There's not a point in being here, because I was doing a lot of extra stuff with Theo. And they said, but at least, I said, at least at Arsenal, the technical side, which he needs, you'll get pushed on. But to be honest, that never really happened. But the next 10 years, I became interested in speed because I'd seen players that I'd have thought in isolation, I'm surprised you can play to that. And then the last 10 years, maybe because of my dodgy knee and everything like that, I'm finishing a PhD at the minute. I'm nearly finished, and that's in the psychology area. So Integer is a kind of mix of all of the things I've studied all the way through to support a player individually. And I think from a parent's point of view, as you've asked me, think ways to help parents and et cetera, et cetera. One of my observations is through the years, and all children aren't fortunate enough to have some people haven't even got one parent there, but I have observed that if I go back to Janino and his dad, Osvaldo, they were a partnership. And when I ended up doing little things for Janino and helping them in little jobs just because I was English, that was all. It was fascinating for me to be around a world-class player, but Simon do this, Simon do that, Simon do. I'd helped him with the press and different things like that, but it were like dealing with two people. Don Walcott and Theo was a little bit similar. I obviously had Micah Richards with me at one point, and I was doing a lot strategy-wise with Micah, and a lot. I did a lot with Lincoln, his dad, and when Micah was in my soccer school, did a little bit there, then into Oldham, then into City. But I'd meet the dad once a week, and we'd talk through, this good idea to do this, think about that. What about moving into that position? But they were like a team, and dads or mums or parents, I think, are really important in this whole journey. And you've got the thing where some people will be like, well, the parents are too much involved and saying too much and this, that and the other. But they've got a key role. Nobody knows that child. If you ever want to find it like their parent, how they move, whether you're going to Klopp or to Bielsa, or the one you need to go to is the parent. But it's how you support them is key. Michael Owen's dad, Terry, that's another example, with them two. I'm doing something with Michael Owen. Terry's there in the background, but he's not here on top of it, and he's not. Do you know what I mean? The successful players that I've seen and worked with, there was a great partnership going. Andy Gray's like that with Archie, and Andy's at everything. He's done the whole journey with them. Obviously, he played. You've got the great family history. But Andy is not a sort of all on top of it or not. Sort of leaves you to it back, and he's there. Andy replicates a sort of style that I've seen in a lot of successful parents, that they kind of leave the people working with them and trust them.
They do, yeah.
And I think that's an important observation with parents, because I think for some it can get too stressful. In Integer at the beginning, maybe I didn't call it. I came up with this name. Integer means like complete, but even when I was working with individuals before that, I'd sometimes have to say to parents, to some of them, you need to step back, because I thought at first the kids were scanning, it was awareness. It's not. They just checking all the time where their parents are. I say, you can't do anything while you're there. And that's an important, so it's that balance. But all of the main ones I sort of, as I say, I wasn't coaching Janino. He was, I was in there more of a bit of a gopher for him and different things around the house all the time. But it was a great blessing to me to observe that
relationship. Yeah.
But the way through, I've noticed that with some of the kids that are successful, it's that relationship with them. Know that the dad's got the back and he's there for everything. He's taking them everything. He's sorting them out with the coach to do this, the person to do that. But he's not kind of, with Andy and Archie, I used to with and Harry, Andy and I had sort of discussed the things to maybe be on once a year, and then he just let me get on and work through them.
It's like it's a partnership. Like I said, isn't it? Yeah, you've got to work together as a team.
Yeah, so they're massively important, but it's got to be at the right level and not too intense. So it doesn't last for them. Kids are getting took into clubs at such young age now. It's all. I think the stress becomes too much for them. You've got to take that back. Yes, it's not got to be stressful. It's the reason you do it. Like I did at the beginning, I loved it. I love taking people on. I love shooting. I love practicing. You have to keep that.
Just touching upon like those players that you have worked with, is there anything that you think the players in particular have in common, the ones that have reached those top levels? Any particular sort of things that you can see, not just like technically, but also like maybe psychologically?
I think that the main one would be, I could think of one exception. And no, actually, that's not fair because he was into football. He's not an exception. He was into football too. I think to the point of getting success, some of them don't stay with this and don't say as engaged with it, but they all had an obsession with the game. And I don't just mean the coaching, the playing or the practicing. I mean the watching. They loved it. I try to work a lot with players from history. I'm always showing people Garrincha still. I'm saying, look at I've got pictures of him. Look at his low angle when he's dribbling, or 58, 62 World Cup. But some of them will say, I've heard of him. I know nowadays they know it on FIFA, but some of them, I think they had a love of the actual game. And there's great neuroscience, brain science on the value of watching, not just like specific video, but watching games, which kids today don't watch enough football. They don't watch enough. It's all, and I'm not saying watching silly, YouTubers doing
like Sidemen challenge,
things like that. I mean, watching a player. There's neuroscience that would show us that if I'm learning, if I'm in the process of learning a particular new motor skill, for me to watch a video of an expert practitioner doing that particular skill well, doing it with mastery, that's as useful to me as doing that session in practicing it myself. Okay, it's as useful. If you had somebody watching the video and then afterwards doing practice in that 20 minutes after watching the video, that is twice as useful as either the mechanical practice or the video.
Thought of it like that.
So I've observed that these people watch a lot of matches as well, the ones that do well, and they're watching football all the time. You can get you can get a long way now and get into academies and maybe even get careers and without watching a lot of it and not even liking it that much.
Yeah.
They're maybe on a parent's push towards football. But I think the ones that I'm a romantic towards football because it's been my whole life other than that little deviation into I've been obsessed with the game. And I love everything about it. Pele calls it the beautiful game. It is. But I think what I've found in common is those people love football. It's what you go to the houses, football's on. You ask them about this something or they've got no idea because, yeah.
That's nice. It's a nice way to sort of wrap things up, I suppose. Yeah, I've got some quick fire questions for you to finish off with, but it's been really insightful just to listen to, the close relationship you've had with like top players and coaches throughout the year and throughout your time in coaching. And I think a lot of our parents and players will gain good knowledge from it.
Might even have some little questions for you after as well. I think they might want to.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I know obviously we could speak for hours and hours.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Some of those fantastic players that you've had the chance to work with, but I'll wrap us up with some quick fire questions, Simon. So I'm just going to come with them with you and just come back with some answers. So I'll start with favourite food.
Oh, well, I follow a diet called the How Not to Die diet. I have for the last 9 years. So in the morning, I don't really have a favourite. In the morning, beans, vegetables, brown rice. I eat the How Not to Die from Dr. Greger.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's so cool.
Favourite song?
It's a hymn. It's a Gregorian, it's actually from Thomas Aquinas wrote it, Panilingue Gloriosa or Tantamego Sacramento.
I definitely have to have a look at that one. Well, I'm sure we have to spell that one as well. Obviously, you've already answered this one, but favourite football team?
The Borough.
Mighty Middlesbrough. Night out or night in?
In.
Night in.
Did too many nights out at one point in my life. Don't want any more nights out.
Been there, done it. This will be a tough one, because you've got a whole array, but I'll go for one. Best player you've maybe played with that maybe within, your playing career and coached as well, or that had the chance to work with.
Well, I got in Brazil to join in a lot of training and do. The best player I've ever been around that I've done anything with, and he was a friend as well, and people might not remember him, was Emerson, who was at Middlesbrough. He had everything. I remember Alan Hansen, who was your previously, where Gary Lineker's the main one on. Alan Hansen was your main punt, like Carrer and Neville. It was Alan Hansen. I remember Alan Hansen after 3 months of MO playing at Middlesbrough. He said, forget all the Player of the Year awards. This guy's running away with them all. But Barcelona came in for him and his head went, and he was a great person, but he was a very complete footballer. And I'm trying to, this side of it, he needed a bit of help with.
Yeah.
Striking a ball. Michael Owen, Theo Walcott. Wow. I was lucky to be at Barcelona training before as well and observe Luis Suarez to see him. You look and think, oh, I've never seen anybody quite like that. That were even on Suarez with his weaker foot.
Right.
Well, it's crazy.
But this lad Emerson, he never even made it to Brazil, but he was. You'll know people like that. But we took him Middlesbrough from Porto. And Bobby Robson, I believe. Remember Bobby Robson?
Yeah.
He quit the Porto job over Mo being sold. We got him in, but he's he was. He could have been everything.
And maybe I'll go quickly on that one again. Best person that you've maybe, or best, player, say, is that you've coached with, so someone you coached alongside, maybe that, that you've learned maybe loads of methods from or whatever.
Oh, player.
Yeah, well, coach or someone that maybe you've worked with in a partnership and that you thought was, maybe most helpful to you in your journey.
Maybe some of them in Brazil at the beginning. The guy, Professor Emilio Miranda, maybe him. And Socrates, I was lucky to be friends with him. Although he wasn't a coach, he should have been a coach. He would like to have been that. He didn't get many. He's probably him and Sir Clive Woodward Sir Clive Woodward as well. Right up there. They were two of the most outstanding people I've known in my lifetime.
Some good names there.
See if you can get them all then. So if we're going to go for a dinner party with 3 people, you can invite 3 people, can be dead or alive, past or present, but any 3 people that you can have at your dinner party, who are you having?
Cus D'Amato, coach of Mike Tyson. Percy Wells Cerity is one of my coaching heroes. Right. He was athletics coach, revolutionised middle and long distance running in the 50s, 60s. And John Wooden, the basketball coach, those 3.
It's a nice covering all areas, multi-sports.
And Theo mentioned she's all from Geordie Shore.
It's a little bit first side.
There's somebody, Tommy or Scott Tommy, say, I didn't know it was a much better answer. God, I didn't know leave on to it.
Is there no one on that? And then last one, then dream holiday destination.
Rome. I've just been recently. I think Rome. I love Rome.
Lovely. No, fantastic. Well, that wraps us up there. Simon, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matty and Alex. Well, just all your great work for coming. You're doing fantastic stuff in Leeds, and we'll be talking on the great ones that come through from you over the years to come.
Appreciate it. Thank you
very much, Si.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers.